next up, we're going to stay with South Africa. And I'm delighted to say I can see my next keynote speaker on screen. Absolutely.
Hi, Nadine.
Hello there. And it's Rapelang Rabana. And it's wonderful to be here. And I know you're going to be talking about digital mastery, making digital technologies work for your business. And just a little bit on you. You're an internationally renowned technology entrepreneur. You've amassed, I know, over 15 years experience building innovative technologies. So much so that you've been named entrepreneur for the world, not just South Africa, oh no, for the World Entrepreneurship Forum. It's such a hard thing to say. We bow down to you.
Long thing. Thank you so much, Nadine.
Yeah, it's lovely to have
you.
Good
morning, good afternoon.
Q&A.
Great. My name is Rapelang Rabana, and I'm one of those people you probably consider a digital native of sorts. And I'm grateful actually for these COVID times because it's gotten everyone talking about my favorite topic, digital tech, digital this and that. And even those who had tried to avoid it for the longest of times, they had to start talking about it. So what does it really mean to be a digitally transformed business? What does it mean to be a digital business? Wherever you've landed up in your thinking over the last few months, if you're on the right track, you've probably started to realize that it's less about technologies and much more about people. In the 15 years of building tech, from my first startup year, go straight out of university to being the chief digital officer at one of South Africa's largest IT companies, I have learned that the most important thing you can do when it comes to anything digital is to skip over all of those fancy terms and jargons, rather take a step back, understand the human behaviors that are driving everything behind the scenes. And it's not about IoT and AI. When you understand the behaviors and drivers behind these things, it's a whole lot easier to figure out where technology is going and how to apply it to your organization and to your life context. So Nadine, for today's session, I really want to give you 3 almost superpowers that you can use when you think about technology. And I want you to sort of step away from any previous thoughts that you've had. And say, I want you to go in your mind's browser, clear your cache, delete your history, and navigate to a blank web page for this conversation. I'm going to give you 3 superpowers. 1, the ability to follow the human drivers. 2, the ability to escape your limiting beliefs. And 3, cultivate new. So let's get going, right? What do I mean by following the human drivers? Let's reflect on what's causing this change in our lives. What's driving this relentless activity to constantly generate new technologies, new ways of doing that, new words? Why can't we just sit, pipe down and chill? From as far back as I can see in all the reading I've ever done, from before the first industrial revolution through all the industrial revolutions to the advent of the modern era today, the constant thread, everything together, has been this almost indomitable need to do more, to produce more of industrial materials, of clothes, of houses, of cars, more everything, while using less resources, less time, less energy, less money. And the only way to stretch those resources further, to stretch that a little bit further, is to invest in producing more efficiently through new technologies. And what is actually required to help us produce more efficiently? It's quite simple, actually. To be able to do something better and more efficiently than you've ever done before, you need to actually understand and see what happened before. You need to be able to look at the factors that affected things and diagnose what went well, what went wrong, and extrapolate those factors into the future to see what would happen if you changed this or that. And that allows you to predict the future and execute a better outcome. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the human behavior that drives big data, machine learning, AI. This human behavior isn't just something that started with digital technologies, not at all. It's always been there, except that before we wanted to get information about what happened, you would talk to people, you would measure things manually, you would use meters, you would visualize and interpret that data in diagrams, reports, pictures. You might have been able to produce sophisticated Excel models that allowed you to integrate that data and help you make a decision to a better outcome. That human drive to understand and improve so we can produce more efficiently is simply now translated into digital technologies that help us first to see and track what's happening. And that's why we've got stuff like, RFI tags or sensors or cameras or any of those IoT things. We then create all of these things that help us see, to companies' ERP systems, to mobile apps on our phone, to the cloud, and allow us to visualize and interpret that data. We take all of that data and create 3D models or digital twins of that, so that we can play around with the factors in different scenarios to see what different outcomes result in without having to actually wait. From an app that a hairdresser or salon might have to be able to track where their customers came and when they next need a treatment, to kind of Fitbits and fitness wear on our watches and that help us better understand being, to the kind of smart factories out there that can track when a machine needs to be repaired and taken out of service, to smart hospitals that ensure that they have maximum full utilization at all times. It's all about, and if you look at it carefully, it's all about how we see what is happening better, how we easily understand that so that we can exploit any inefficiencies and fix them and make better decisions ultimately. This is the number one human behavior that is driving change in all industries and will continue to drive change in future industries as well. This is just one of the drivers. I mean, there's so many others. There's drivers in how we build trust in information in each other so that we can trade and engage with people that we don't know. There's human drivers around how, despite physical distance and gaps in time, we still seek the intimacy of in-person conversations. It's about the human behavior that drives our need for convenience to get a service in just the right quantity at just the right time at my preferred place and circumstance. All of these behaviors, create whole technologies and industries, but that's for another. What I really want you to take away from this conversation is to recognize that by following the human behavior, you can track where the technology is going and what it's really looking to solve. This leads us to superpower number 2, escaping your limiting assumptions. Your limiting assumptions are those very things that will prevent you from separating yourself from your current reality and following those human trends that I've just mentioned. Most of us, sadly, don't realize that we spend our entire lives in a self-created box, a bell jar that determines so much of our behavior, how our brain is wired, how we see the world. So much so that we are not aware that we are only seeing one view of the world. The biggest block by far and away to creativity and innovation results from people's broad acceptance of the status quo. I even say a deep emotional connection to the way things are, a blind adherence to this is how the world works. And the one major benefit from COVID-19 is that it has forced us to see that that status quo can change very dramatically and very quickly. That the things we held constant and permanent are actually probably not that permanent. This is fertile ground for innovation. Space for innovation is created when we become aware that our perception of a fixed reality, when we notice that our assumptions are just that, and we realize that they're malleable and we release our minds from them. Now is the time to recognize those arbitrary habits and beliefs that guide how we live and work and open our minds to new possibilities. What are the assumptions that you hold in your mind? And are they still true? What are the assumptions you hold about where you will find your future customers, how they will make their buying decision, the assumptions about the value you perceive they get from your product or service, the assumptions about what they did before and after they interacted with your company, the assumptions about why they will really stay with you. You know, I recently bought a car, and in that experience, I saw the complete misalignment of world perspectives and sort of assumptions, I guess. The sales rep, in fairness, did a good job for the person they assumed I was. You see, I'm from that customer segment that knows nothing about cars, that doesn't really seek to know anything about cars. And if I could avoid buying one altogether, I would. So I don't really get all the fanfare that they do in the dealerships about getting a car and getting all that hype going on. I would have much rather preferred to do most of the purchasing decision online. Maybe even if the car was dropped off at my house, it would have been great, much like a dishwasher. And I don't think I'm the only one, as crazy as that might seem, but it intrigues me how little the car market caters for this segment. Because let's face it, most of the people who work in the automotive sector have some kind of deep affinity to cars. And so there are assumptions in their minds that they can't get past when it comes to buying cars, and why they create the experience in line with their own assumptions. Our entire life is made up of assumptions, and over years and decades, it starts to look like the truth. And that is why it is so hard to change how things work, why we sell the products we do, and how we can actually change and improve them. The final power, Nadine, that I want to leave you with today is the ability to cultivate new ways of work so that you can get stuff done. And this links quite strongly to the message that Jeff was sharing. You have probably done the work maybe to follow those human behaviors, to uncover and overcome those limiting assumptions, but the big establishment makes it difficult to get things done. An important step to facilitating innovation in a large organization is to stop thinking about the business as one monolithic structure, but to rather organize it into different parts. You can't do away with the core business that is focused on driving operational efficiencies for the short term. And the large corporate can't become a startup. It's more about creating a space in the middle for practical agility where you can drive new initiatives. This is the space for collaborative, or digital collaboration rather, connecting you to innovators inside the business, external innovators in the ecosystem and startup community, where you can jointly invest in new initiatives and projects that could ultimately plug in to the engine or be spun out. The digital business of the future is the one that encompasses both the innovation and entrepreneurial abilities, as well as the operational capabilities. If you're too focused on the innovation piece, you're not getting to scale and results. If you're too focused on the operational component, you're not getting new things coming, and you risk becoming irrelevant in many cases. It is in that space of practical agility that you've got to create a space that is not about hierarchy, that is cross-functional teams working together, that are able to have conversations of radical candor. And this is the critical step to being able to overcome and surface your own limiting assumptions. It's incredibly hard to break out of divisions and silos in big corporations, and you can't overhaul an operating model overnight. But what you can do is organize short-term, cross-functional teams focused on solving a specific problem in the business or generating ideas for a new product. And instead of coming out with a 30-page business plan or another long PowerPoint deck, coming out with something that you can actually test with customers to get real data from, genuine feedback. And in this way, facilitating these kind of sprints is probably the best shift that you can make as an organization. And in my work in teams, helping them through this shift of focusing data from the probably the most important step. Most corporates are still stuck in the idea of hippo-style decision-making, which really means the paid person's opinion versus client's feedback. In this new digital business and new world, your customer is 100 times, if not 1,000 times, more important than your boss's opinion. The organization and every decision you make needs to reflect this, should be directed at this. So don't focus on chasing waterfalls of long business plans and multi-year projects before you see any results. Rapid focus sprints are the way to go. They bring customers into the conversation earlier and structure your organization and initiatives around the customer's value streams. And this is going to be a big determinant of who does well in this coming period. So these three superpowers, Nadine, the ability to follow the human drivers, to escape your limiting assumptions, and cultivate new ways of work, will incredibly accelerate your capacity to build those digital businesses that are adaptive and responsive. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm glad I've got some new superpowers. I've always wanted those.
There we go.
Yeah, and that makes real sense, actually. It's quite incredible, actually, because having sort of been on the conference circuit for nearly 30 years, what struck me is that those businesses nearer the customer have got the digital space, I'm generalizing now, so much better because they understand that end customer. Yet we've had these sort of innovative tools in our pockets, certainly the last 10 years. I've certainly appreciated them for the last 3 to 4 months. Yet there's still some dinosaurs out there, some businesses and industries, where I'm not going to name shame.
You can't do that here.
Embrace digital transformation. So, I mean, you've talked about getting closer to the customer as probably the starting point. But if you are those businesses, well, actually, do you know what? We haven't fully utilised those. The 5G around the corner. Wow, that Internet of Things is really going to come a reality. Where should people start?
Sure. I think a lot of the time when businesses start, they actually did build the right tools to service the customers well. But as time changes, that goalpost has moved forward. The way to solve the customer problem now has to change and catch up. And we don't take the time to realize, oh my word, let's get back to the core problem that the customer was facing. And let's figure out how to solve that problem in a fundamentally new way. I mentioned in my example how we used to allow us to solve a problem to a certain extent. Now with digital technologies, we have to be able to connect and see even more, be able to interpret and model what's happening in our customers' environments to an incredible amount of detail so that we can solve that problem at an even better level. And this is where we kind of get stuck because it worked so well in 20, 30 years. Now you've got to stop that and say, actually, maybe a deeper way to solve it. And you'll find that there's the resistant pocket, these organizations already that are shouting for this, but they're probably not being heard, and there isn't a space and a mechanism for those ideas to come out. And instead of waiting for your big restructure to end in 3 years' time, this is where those short-term rapid design sprints are so key to get the ball rolling and get some runs on the board.
Indeed. And how do you encourage that innovation? No matter what size the business is. Apart from having an department, which sometimes is not the most approach.
No.
Everyone has a voice, because I know you mentioned about bringing the customer in, but if you've got millions of customers, there's only so much that you can do in order to tailor your offering. You can't listen to everybody, or can you?
It's yes and no. I think the beginning of these processes is to look at those cross-functional teams. And Graham mentioned how it's a mix of authority and responsibility. So it's not about people with the authority in the room, but people that are most in contact with the challenge or the problem that you're facing, and all the people they ever interact with to try and solve it. Most of the time, they've never had an opportunity to be in the same room together without having to defer to some of you to allow X and Y to happen. So creating that and a mechanism for people who haven't worked together before to now work together is sort of the most basic starting point. And there's that good facilitation of that session helps the conversation get going, people to bridge those gaps. at the point when you actually have something to show your customer, it doesn't matter that you've got millions of customers. If you can just engage with the 10 or 20 at the beginning, you have a sense, everybody says no, that this is a dead end. Instead of saying, we'll know when we hit 1,000, you can start with every single customer's voice and get that feedback, take that data, put it into your thinking, readjust, and move forward from there. You're never going to be done. And you're going to have to keep taking in that data and reflecting and adjusting. And I think shifting from that notion of the product is finished, let's ship it, to we've interacted with these customers, let's fix it for now, let's interact with more customers later, fix it further, and keep on going. That's the digital business.
Indeed, and there are the tools to feedback as well. So you're very
exactly.
simple to ignore them. We've got a quick comment in here. It says, yes to buying online, even cars. It's from Rosalie McCartney. I'm loving the backdrop as well. I take it's a public building, or is it your own private library?
No. I thought I would come and find an expansive place to share the talk with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so lovely to have you. Thank you so much. And obviously, right, well, we're going to go to